I'm Ryan. I'm a science teacher.
I'm Cheryl, and I slept through science.
Each episode will tackle a science question you may have learned in school, but can't quite remember or fully explain.
And I'll take the risk of asking the dumb questions so that we can all understand the science we slept through.
The bell has rung. Let's get started. Welcome to lesson 35. We are in our houseplants unit. Cheryl, should I say Cheryl's houseplants unit? Would that make you happier?
Yes, you should. Yes.
So what are we going to learn about your houseplants this week?
This is a very selfish unit because I'm solve my problems about my houseplants so I can be better at my little side hobby of having 5 houseplants in my house.
Yeah, except you do know, like I mentioned last week, that I'm not great at growing houseplants. So I might know why things happen. That doesn't necessarily mean I'm great at it.
I mean, that's fine because isn't a lot of science like knowing things in theory and being like, I don't know, I've never done it. Is that part of science? Does it depend on the area of science?
That's a loaded question that I feel like would be a conversation for another time.
Okay.
In general,
fine.
I'm going to say, if you just force me to a yes or no, I'm going to say, no, not really.
Okay,
but
fine.
I understand what you're going from. So
Well,
what's
my
your question this
question
week?
today is something we super briefly mentioned last week. We were talking about why is overwatering plants bad. And I was mentioning that one of the things that happens is that sometimes the leaves turn yellow.
Mm-hmm.
Now, another thing I said is that the leaves can dry out. That makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah.
Doesn't have enough water or whatever, can't support that leaf's life anymore, dries right up.
Yep.
Right? I get that. That happens in fall with all sorts of trees too. So like that's fine. But sometimes the leaves turn yellow. And the funny thing is if you Google like why are my house plants leaves turning yellow, it's like you might be over or under watering, or it might have too much sun or too little sun, or need more soil. It's like could be anything. It's just that it needs something it's not getting, or it's getting too much of something that it needs only a little bit of.
Yeah.
But it's one of its needs are not being met. And so why do they turn yellow? Like that's just so odd to me. It's not always, it doesn't seem like it's always grouped with like eventually drying out, but sometimes it is. I don't know. It just seems like its own little thing that they turn yellow, and I don't totally get it.
Your question is not what's happening to the plant that causes them to have yellow leaves, but why is the color of the leaves when these things happen to the plant yellow?
More so. I mean, if you want to touch on what's happening to the plant, that could be interesting, but
you already mentioned some of those causes: overwatering, underwatering, more light, not enough light, all of those things.
Yeah.
But why is it yellow as opposed to brown or purple or chartreuse or whatever?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's an interesting question. Why do they turn yellow? Okay. Let's start with this for our pre-assessment. What color are most leaves normally?
Green.
Okay. Why are leaves green?
There's something in them that makes them green that I learned. There's something in them. That's it.
Yeah, there you go.
I learned the name. There's like a name of something that I remember learning in school that makes them green.
A name of something that makes them green.
Yeah.
And any inclination around that name at all, like a letter or?
No. I mean, I'm not psychic, so I don't know how I'd guess that.
Okay. Okay.
I remember learning it around the time I learned about like how the cell walls of plants are like more like a rectangular, like and rigid. And then it was like, and they're green because of this thing.
Okay.
So yeah.
So as far as the structure of a plant cell, whatever the green part is, you're associating it with the cell wall, the outside of the cell.
I at least learned it in the same day in school, but it might have. So I feel like it has to do something with the cells.
Okay. May or may not be the cell wall, but has something to do with the
Yeah.
cells.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. That's great. Knowing that, maybe a little bit of reminder from last week, and again, you referenced this a little bit already, but what are the things that cause a plant to change its leaves color?
Dying.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if a plant is not doing well, it's in the death throes, what do you think, what do you think could cause it to change the color of its leaf? Like, why would something related to dying lead to a change in color?
Maybe if it's not getting like the nutrients it needs somehow or another. Maybe the nutrients like contribute to that color.
Okay.
And so, or it can't like support itself in its whole plant way that it needs to. And so maybe it can't be that like vibrant color.
What do you mean can't support itself?
Nutritionally to like be healthy, because it's not getting something that it needs and it's dying. And so it's weird because like if I think about like autumn leaves, I'm wondering if this is related. If this is the same reason that leaves turn colors in the fall, is why my house plants leaves turn yellow when their like little fragile bodies get slightly too much sunshine and they need to chill out a little bit. But I guess it makes sense that like if they're dying, they eventually change a color. I just don't know why it's yellow.
Yeah.
Or like, is it going to turn orange and red eventually? I don't think so. I think they just turn brown after that. So that feels different than the fall time.
You mean in a house plant, it's not going to turn the orange and red, that in the fall they might?
Yeah, I don't think so.
Do you think that the two processes are related to each other? Or do you think they're separate?
I think they might be related because it's all about them dying. Okay.
So in the fall, those leaves are dying as well?
Yeah.
Okay. What?
You're now I'm doubting it.
No, remember, I'm just asking to try and figure out what you know and what you already think, whether it's all accurate or not.
That's what I know.
All about death. So we should probably rename this episode All About Plant Death. Why do plants die? I don't think that's quite the question. Okay, so there's something in plants that makes them green that you learned about, and it maybe is related to their cells.
Yeah.
Seems like the changing of color is relating to dying, maybe something similar to what happens to leaves in the fall, but there's something that's different because the houseplants don't turn the red or the orange color.
Yeah.
You've never seen them turn a red or an orange color?
Well, not mine.
Okay. But what if they continue to die after yellow, what do they?
Just like brown and then shriveled up.
Okay. Yeah. And where do you think the brown color comes from?
I think it's just like a lack of color.
Okay. Brown is a lack of color.
Yeah. That's what I think.
Okay. Any other thoughts on what might contribute to the yellow leaves specifically?
I mean, yellow is next to green.
Okay.
It's not like across the color wheel. It's right next to it. So like they're neighbors.
They're neighbors.
So it doesn't seem random. I'm just kind of curious why.
And you said you've killed multiple types of houseplants in the past.
Sure have.
Yes. Yeah. Do they all turn yellow, or does it change a little bit from one species of plant to another?
It does change because some of them just drop their leaves and they're green and they just drop them.
Okay.
Some of them go straight to like brown and shriveled.
Okay.
And it's hard to know if it changes because of the plant or because of the way it is dying.
Sure. Because you've got a variety of ways that you can kill a houseplant.
Yes. I'm sure I've killed my houseplants for so many different reasons.
Okay. All right, those are some great ideas for us to go ahead and build on. The first thing that I think I'd like to build on from what you said is where we started with our pre-assessment, with that substance that makes plants green.
Yes, what is it? What is it?
You'll recognize it when you hear it. It's called chlorophyll.
Oh yeah, I know. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It was in my brain somewhere.
Yeah, for sure. And it's not a normal word. We don't use it all the time. It's not something that you hear a lot in other places. So it doesn't surprise me that you didn't specifically remember. But when you hear it, it's like, oh yeah, you've learned that.
Yeah.
And it is in the plant cell. It's not in the cell wall. It's in the chloroplast, which you've probably also heard of before.
Yeah, at this point, you could be making up words that are based off of the word chlorophyll.
Chlorophyll, chloroform.
Yeah. All sorts.
Chlorophylo.
Mm-hmm,
I'm making, some of those are real, some of those I made up. Yeah.
Oh boy.
No, so the chloroplast is the structure where photosynthesis happens.
Okay.
And chlorophyll is the pigment. Remember, we've talked about pigments in our last unit about color. We talked a lot about pigments. And it's one of those pigments that makes plants green. It's also the pigment that absorbs the sunlight to do photosynthesis.
Oh, okay.
So without chlorophyll, most plants can't do photosynthesis. And I say most because there are a few other plants that have other pigments that they can also do photosynthesis with, but the primary one is chlorophyll. Okay, so that's our basis. So once we have that, what does that tell you is happening to a leaf when it's turning yellow?
It has less chlorophyll.
Yes. The chlorophyll is actually breaking down. And and there's, depending on what's going on, it depends on what the actual reason is. Like if there's too much sunlight, too much of that energy can overheat the cells. It can kill the cells, which then the chlorophyll can break down. Sometimes the chlorophyll, if it is absorbing too much energy, there's too high energy wavelengths that can break down the molecules. So anyway, there's a lot of reasons why the chlorophyll can break down, but it is actually, you're correct when you said it might be similar to when in the fall leaves change color.
Okay.
And you are correct, because in the fall, the reason that leaves change color is because the chlorophyll breaks down.
Oh, okay.
Now, in those instances, the plants themselves are intentionally no longer making the chlorophyll, and the chlorophyll's breaking down because they're getting ready for the leaves to fall off for the wintertime. And there's actually other pigments also in leaves, but the chlorophyll is the one that's dominant for a whole lot of reasons. There's more of it. Our eyes are the most sensitive to green, so we're going to see the green more easily. There's a lot of factors that go into that. But when the chlorophyll breaks down, any of the other pigment molecules that are in the leaves are ones that we can see. And yellow pigments are one of them. So they're actually there all the time, but there's just more chlorophyll, so we can't see them until the chlorophyll breaks down. Similar thing for like the reds and the oranges that you talked about as well. Like in the fall, those pigments are actually there all the time. And you can see some examples of that because sometimes there's certain leaves, like I think of like some of the, I don't remember what they're exact, a certain type of maple where it's kind of that darkish kind of red color. And that's the color the leaves are all the time, right? It's because they have a primary pigment that isn't chlorophyll.
Okay.
Right. So there are these other pigments, but the primary one, the dominant one that we usually see is from chlorophyll. But when that breaks down for whatever causes it to break down, then you start to see those other colors. With your houseplants, when you're seeing the yellow, again, those yellow pigments are always there, but that's a sign that the chlorophyll is breaking down. And that's not good.
No, I didn't think it was. Yeah.
Right. But The reason it's not good is because now the leaves can't do photosynthesis, which means they can't make the sugars, they can't make their food that they use for energy any longer. And that's why that's also then the leaves end up dying and falling off, is because those leaves don't have what they need in order to survive. And if they're not photosynthesizing, that's a pretty big part of the plant that isn't contributing to the plant anymore. That's what the purpose of leaves is to do photosynthesis. So if they're not doing that anymore, it's in the plant's best interest to cut it off and get rid of it. Otherwise, it's taking up energy and water and nutrients and all of those things to keep all those cells alive when they're not contributing back at all.
Yeah, so that's interesting. I've learned that as a person who has plants, is that if you see a leaf start to die, just cut it off, because sometimes the plant will try to keep it alive, and keeping it alive is wasting energy because it's not going to get it back to where it was. And so really, if you cut it off, then it can use its energy for better, more productive things.
Yeah. And that's, in general, that's true. I'm sure there are exceptions to that. There are certain plants that probably it is more harmful for them if you cut parts off. But yeah, in general, if it's turning yellow, that leaf is probably a goner. It's probably not coming back. It depends. Some plants, you might be able to do some things, especially if it's just like one leaf or two, you might be able to figure it out. But yeah, and hopefully that makes sense as to why now, right? Because those leaves they're dying, which you talked about that, right? And that's true. And again, like we talked about last week, that could be maybe because the roots aren't getting enough oxygen. So the roots are dying, so they can't bring enough water, because you have to have water to do photosynthesis. If you don't have enough water for the leaves to do photosynthesis, you're not going to maintain the chlorophyll anymore. You're not going to keep making the chlorophyll if the chlorophyll just sits there and can't do photosynthesis because there's not enough water. Right? So there's lots of different things. And actually, there's even one website that I found that I can link to in the description that is really detailed to say, okay, if your plant isn't getting enough of this, here's what you'd see in the leaf specifically, right? Like it might be that the main part of the leaf is yellow, but the veins are still green. Or it might be that the whole thing's yellow, or it might be the other way around, like little subtle ways that it would look different depending on what deficiency is leading to the discoloration of your leaves.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Do you feel like that answers your question about the houseplants?
Yeah, absolutely.
And leaves turning yellow?
Yeah.
Okay. And that means that now it's time for your quiz.
Okay, just this one time we can do it.
Yep, just this one time during this episode.
Oh.
I won't do two quizzes to you. All right, first question. What is the name of the molecule that makes leaves green?
Chlorophyll.
Yay! Nice job. Second question. Why is chlorophyll important for a plant?
It's what makes the photosynthesis be able to happen.
Yes, exactly. It's the molecule that actually absorbs the sunlight itself. I don't remember if I said that or not, but it actually does the absorbing of the sunlight.
So, pretty important.
Kind of a big deal. Next question. Where does the yellow in leaves come from?
It's been there the whole time.
What?
Yes. This actually reminds me of our episode on blue eyes versus brown eyes.
Yeah.
Because we talked about that brown eyes are brown because the presence of I have the wrong word in my head and now I can't think of the right word. And I know it's the wrong word. Melanin. There we go. I have melatonin in my head, which is something different.
But I'm very close.
I'm guessing there may be a similar root, but melanin. So if there's melanin present, then that's what you see.
Yep.
And you won't see anything else unless there's not melanin present.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great because melanin is another pigment. It just happens to be in us as animals instead of in plants.
Yeah.
The difference, of course, there isn't a blue pigment behind, whereas in a plant there is a yellow pigment. But yes, that's a great way of making a connection. Follow up with that. Why can we only see the yellow when the plant isn't doing so well?
Well, because green is the dominant color. So color-wise, that's why we can't see it. And then the chlorophyll is green. So it's if the chlorophyll isn't there that we see the yellow, which means it's bad news for that leaf.
Yes. And why would the chlorophyll not be there?
Because it's dying. For various reasons, Ryan.
What is the that's
Could be
dying?
anything. Well, the leaf, hopefully not the whole plant. Sometimes the whole plant too. Sometimes just that leaf.
Yep. Because it's no longer making the chlorophyll and the chlorophyll's breaking down. Because not doing so hot.
Nope.
Yep. Last question. Why might it be helpful to remove yellow leaves from a plant?
Well, Ryan, you see.
Please tell me more.
That the plant possibly is still going to use its energy to try to revitalize that leaf and like bring it back. And if it's a goner, then like it's just wasting its energy when it should be using its energy to keep having its healthy leaves do their job. And if it's putting energy into that, then it's actually going to be less healthy all around.
Yeah. Yep. And hopefully you're noticing the yellow leaves and figuring out what's causing it. So you're stopping that thing.
Yeah. I mean,
so that the whole plant's not dead.
And sometimes the leaves just keep turning yellow and it's, the writing's on the wall, but you don't quite know what's going. Yeah. It could be very sad.
But hopefully not. And and it is related to energy. It might also be resources, like continuing to put water in the leaf, right? And that requires energy, but it may not be directly giving energy to the leaf, if that subtle distinction makes sense.
Yeah.
So, and I don't think I mentioned that previously. So I'm not saying that as a correction. I'm saying that as an addition.
Amazing.
There you go. Now you know why leaves might turn yellow on your plant.
I know, that's pretty cool.
But unfortunately, that's all the time we have for this week's lesson. So why don't you pack up your stuff and get ready for my closing remarks. You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook at I Slept Through Science or on Twitter at Slept Science.
If you have dumb science questions like I do, please send them to us. You can email us at isleptthroughscience@gmail.com, or you can even send us a voice memo and we'll play it on the podcast.
Please rate and review our podcast to tell other people what you think about it, subscribe to make sure you don't miss an episode, and share about our podcast on social media.
Thank you to Beth Reed Miller for the artwork. You can check out more of Beth's artwork at Beth Is Something. Okay, great. Thanks. Bye.
The bell doesn't dismiss you. I dismiss you.